Good morning to you all. We continue on with the discussion of the One Heart, One Mind of ancient Chan Masters. I started this with, how do you teach something that cannot be taught? And I went through from Shifu's book, Attaining the Way, the discourse by the master, name is Chi Xian, and to talk about how one presents Chan. This is not a simple or easy task. It is actually something that is very subtle. Hello? Okay. It is not an easy task because it is something that, as we will look at from the very beginning, it is something that is a bit difficult to present. What we present, which cannot be expressed in words. And I wanted to start just to give you a little bit of a flavor of this, and then we'll go into the doctrinal aspect of it, which predates Chan. But first, as I had promised some of you, that this is from Master Hong Zi. And he says, the vast and far-reaching, without boundaries, secluded, pure, manifesting light, this is a spirit without obstruction. Its brightness does not shine out, but can be called empty and inherently radiant. Its brightness inherently purifying transcends causal conditions beyond subject and object, subtle, but preserved, illumined, and vast. It can also not be spoken of as being or non-being, or discussed with images or calculations. Right in here, the central pivot turns and the gateway opens. Very important. The central pivot point turns. You accord and respond without laboring and accomplish without hindrance. Everywhere, turn around freely, not following conditions, not following classifications, facing everything. Let go and attain stability. Stay with just as that. Stay with this just as this. That and this are mixed together with no discriminations as to their places. So it is said that the earth lifts up the mountain without knowing the mountain's stark steepness. A rock contains jade without knowing the jade's flawlessness. This is how you truly leave home. How home leaving must be enacted. Master Hongzhi was around the 12th century when this is written. I want to read you another piece, very interesting, if I can find it. There is a saying in the Lankavatara Sutra itself, which goes something like this. All of the words of the Buddha revolve around the mind as its axis. Remember what Master Hongzhi was saying about this pivot point, and here's this pivot point, and he's saying that all the words of the Buddha revolve around this pivot point. This expresses the principle of mind Dharma. Chan is therefore mind Dharma, direct experience of one's self nature, indeed of one's Buddha nature. It is not the Dharma of words and language. One experiences this wisdom by directly letting go, relinquishing, putting down self-attachment, self-referentiality, and grasping, or the grasping that hinders us from liberation. Despite the fact that this teaching of directly putting down, letting go of self can be traced to India. It was only in China that it evolved into a tradition that we know today. In India, the tradition mainly developed around the graded practice of meditation. However, this guided or graded practice, as demonstrated in methods such as the 4 stages of mindfulness, requires one to have little involvement with the world, such as the forest tradition. You also need a lot of time and a process. I'll skip a little bit here. And he says, the integration of the life and practice has very deep roots. So this is an integration of this life and incorporating the practice so that the practice is the life. In fact, we say sitting meditation itself cannot bring about enlightenment. Often we hear the Chan Master say, meditation not only is not enlightenment, meditation does not lead to enlightenment. Enlightenment is the actuality of letting go of the self directly. That does not necessarily have anything to do with meditation. One puts down self-grasping through various methods. And he said, for example, Wei Nan became enlightened upon hearing these words from the Diamond Sutra. He's referring to Hui Ning. The past mind is unattainable. The future mind is unattainable. The present mind is unattainable. These words are Master Sheng Yen's words. And you see, not much has changed in 1,000 years, or to reach where Master Sheng Yen is espousing the same thing. That's there, that this experience is one of a direct experience. It is our mistake that we are always pointing our finger at the moon. And so all that happens by doing that is that one sees the very fingertip, but they never bother to see that. And there is an idea that there is a duality there, ignorance and enlightenment, that is not there. It is complete as it is. And this is very, very important, because when we begin to practice, we have to know what we're practicing. And therein lies the problem for many, many people. We practice our legs in meditation. We practice and we read and read and read and read and read to gain more, quote unquote, insight into what's happening. And then we go around and parrot the words of the masters from before, holding them up as if that they had some special understanding by simply reciting them, by repeating them, rather than looking into them. And this is something that was there from the very, very beginning. And it's why when I started this class to talk about the ancient masters, I went, where do I begin? What do I say? What is important? What is important is to encourage you in your self-practice, encourage you in the right way, to encourage you so that you do not rely on words, but that you go beyond the words. It does not mean that we discredit the words. There's a kind of a funny, almost a contradiction in that I am speaking to you via words, but I also tell you that I have nothing to teach. And this is something that you go, well, how is that? And because it doesn't work that way. From the very, very beginning, it was this way. We go back to the ancient sutras, early Mahayana sutras, and they all espouse this meaning as more important than the words. The terms, let me see, go into my PowerPoint. Rutha in Sanskrit means words, and artha means meaning. But in the ancient sutras, the Mahayana sutras, and even predating the Mahayana sutras, there was meditation. But in this, where they're saying that there are words, but the meaning is inexpressible. And when the meaning is inexpressible, you say, well, then what use is the words? The words are kind of like a template or a guide for us to apply ourselves to the practice. I oftentimes refer to it as a foundation, as if you're going to partake in a meal, but first you have to put the tablecloth and then the instruments that you're going to use to eat the food, and the plates and the cups. All of those things have to be there like a foundation, but they cannot be the essence of it, because they themselves are still phenomenal. They belong to that which you're looking for, that which is the very mind that you're using to look for. And in this way, it's something I've mentioned many times. Master Ling Chi would say, in this day and age, and that was in the 700, the 8th century. And he say, in this day and age, people cut off their heads and then go about looking for their heads. He's bringing it all the way back. It's just this mind, this ekayana that's here. And this ekayana holds everything without holding anything, because there is not a thing there. So how do we get to that point? Well, we don't, because that we that we're talking about, this collective we, is a dream. It's an illusion. It is not mine. Mine creates this illusion. You belong to mine. Mine knows you, but you don't know mine. You cannot know mine, and you cannot use words to get mine. So you just go, this is very, very confusing. This is frustrating. But this is the bitter medicine. This is what you need to know in order to progress. So you don't hold on to these words as something that is so sacred that it is going to get you there. And this is the way in which Huineng, he taught the one disciple who was chasing him in the forest, and saying, without thinking of what's sacred or profane, what mind is that? Well, if the answer verbally could be expressed so that you could obtain some illumination, that would be great, but it doesn't work that way. You have to exert the proper effort with a true and proper understanding to be able to do this. So I want to go and take you back to the very dawning, actually pre-dawning of Chan. And in this time period, we are looking at things, and then who was the first patriarch of Chan? Do you know? Sue's looking at it like this is a trick Chan question. Who's the first patriarch of Chan? Established it in the books. You look and you see him in the top of the list. Nobody knows. Nobody knows this. Yeah, you have to unmute people. Eon has it up. Marie, I think she was jumping up and down. Anybody? All right. I'll say it for you, and then you can nod and tell me if you know that. Bodhidharma or Dhamma, right? Let me see. I'm seeing people see if they're nodding your head or not, or you're just trying not to nod your head. Okay. I don't see very many pictures of people. All right. So, yes and no. There were Chinese masters that predated Bodhidharma. One of them was a contemporary, and one what came a little bit after him that had studied independent of him that came about this study. Sheng Chao. I don't know if you can read that with the reflection down at the bottom here. Sheng Chao was a master from 480 to 560. So he was early 6th century. And then afterward, Tan Qian also came a little bit after him. And they were essentially the forerunners of Bodhidharma in terms of bringing forth the practice. And before them, Buddha Bhadra from 359 to 429 also introduced meditation to the practice, and he was straddling between the Hinayana and Mahayana at that time, moving into Mahayana. So he was at the very, very beginning of Mahayana. And why? Is because he began to read the text of Mahayana and began to see that there was this one mind ekayana, and that this was a little bit more of a stronger argument than saying that everything is real, saying that everything it's just mine. And so he was the one that brought this even before Bodhidharma came. He was espousing this, and then Sheng Chao picked it up, and again was a contemporary of Bodhidharma, and so he was also presenting this as well. And let me read a little bit of what they were saying. He had 2 chapters on the methods of concentration for meditation, and disciplined himself to the Zen-like saying of the Indian Master Buddha: the highest principle is not for words, and the mind of the sage is unhindered. So he's saying that from Shujamonifo, Shakyamuni Buddha, he was already saying this, that the highest principle was not words, and that just the mind of the sage or a bodhisattva is unhindered. It is unhindered because it is not clinging to anything. The thoughts go freely through the mind. We later come to know this as Wu Nian, this natural flow of thoughts through the mind. It is not the repression of thoughts or suppression of thoughts. It is the allowance of thoughts to move freely through without being filtered, without being captured and perfumed by some habitual pattern. That when the mind is just simply free to present as it needs to in the present moment, there's liberation there. And so that this is the mind of a sage. So right here, even before we get to Bodhidharma, there is this reflection of what the Buddha was saying quite some time before, maybe 1,000 years before, and saying, here it is. But this is the dawning of Chan. It's very, very interesting how we get here and how this comes about. It's really on solid ground in terms of Mahayana practice. Let me read a little bit more. He said, when the mind and objects are all made to vanish, concentration and peace are achieved spontaneously. His words point to the object-free meditation in which the Zen masters will later characterize as an expression without thought and without representation. This is very interesting. I want to use a modern day analogy of something because I like music and I like playing music on speakers. And if you set up your system just right, when you play the music, the speakers disappear. And all you have is a sound stage before you. You cannot hear the music coming out of the speakers. You just hear it as if it's a performance in front of you. And this is the same thing that when we're practicing in Chan, we do not see a point of origin as much as just simply the fulfillment of mind itself. There is not mind looking at some object. It is mind in harmony with mind. And when we see that, there is no separation, no place where we say, okay, this is where Ananda begins, the mind of Ananda, and the environment. It isn't in this way. The environment is mind. And so it's a different way of looking at things. If we do not look at things in this way, it's difficult for us to be able to make progress in the practice. So let's go from here. And I want to concentrate on these words of, again, I'll show you, Ruta and Artha. Ruta means words and Artha means meaning. I'm concentrating on this because it is at the essence of the Chan practice. This came way before Chan. And if people look at Chan and say, this is a discrete practice that it started here, invented by this person. No, it was blended from many different sources and came about, but it was practiced in a way where its meaning was understood by the Chan masters. And I hesitate to say understood, but it was, I should say it was realized. And that's what's important, because in the sutras, the early sutras, Mahayana sutras, there was this espousing of Ruta and Artha, and in a way in which it was really a uniform instruction. We don't know that because we don't read those sutras, or if we read the sutras, we go, you know what, this sounds quite a bit like this sutra, or this sounds like the Lankavatara Sutra, or this sounds like the whatever sutra, Ratna Vibhaga Sutra. And when we see this, there is a saying. The saying is Artha Pratisa Arana, and this big word here, Artha Pratisa Arana. And that's A. And that word, it stands for this double injunction, which means that it is in the meaning, the essence is in the meaning, not in the words. And so this is very, very important that we look at, because all the way through the early Mahayana sutras, there is this emphasis on that the words are not to be relied upon. The words are to be practiced. So it does not discount the Dharma, but what it does is it places a Dharma in the proper perspective, that this Dharma is within mind. One has to bring about their practice in accordance with this, that we cannot rely upon the understanding of the words. We have to go beyond that into the meaning of the words, and that our practice must be consistent with the meaning of the words. When you sit to meditate, if you sit with this true and proper understanding, then you can make progress. You can make progress because in that moment, the mind is still, it's quiet. It is not expecting anything. It's not putting anything down or picking anything up. It is just simply in the present moment, knowing that the present moment is not the present moment, knowing the past is not the past and the future is not the future. All is within the province of mind. And sitting in this way, the mind can perfectly reflect the environment. What is reflecting it? Mind. What is the environment? Mind. But this is something to be realized. It is not something to try to grasp at. So in this, by the way, I'm going from this article that I just picked up called The Meaning Without Words, the Contrast Between Artha and Ruta in Mahayana Sutras. And this particular person studied many different sutras, and you might get an idea of the sutras. This person is using the formal names of the sutras, but there were quite a few of them here, from the Ratna Sutra, Mahayana Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, Kusala Sutra, Mati Nirdesa Sutra, the Brahman Sutra. So there are many here, Tathagata Sutra, and to try to show this pattern running through all of these sutras. All of these are the very early sutras, the sutras that the Chan school began to rely upon, especially the Lankavatara Sutra, who really kind of repeated this concept throughout the Lankavatara Sutra, in terms of this injunction that it's in the meaning and not in the words. And in these, it's interesting because this particular scholar doesn't try to place a time period on all of the origination of these sutras, because in the context of Chinese study, that almost becomes irrelevant, because we don't know when they started hitting in China, from the date of origin to the date that they actually arrived in China. But they all arrived, and what the scholar wanted to emphasize here, the scholar is Ligia Lu Li. was that they all had this pattern within them. And so this kind of an idea of this kind of a double injunction, like only on meaning and not on the words, is again something that isn't necessarily an easy thing for us to understand, because we cannot understand it. And if we stop there, we stop as a scholar and go, that's an interesting concept, but they don't know what they're talking about. That doesn't even make any sense. So, or if it's a probing scholar, they're saying there's got to be something here beyond the words. What does that mean? And so looking into that, even though the scholar may not have the ability for a realization, they still know that there's something there, that at least it was being espoused in this way from these different sutras that were coming in pre-Chan, coming in and expressing what Chan stands for. So when the first lecture I gave in the series, I talked about that it's beyond words. And so here it is. And then we say, well, how do we teach this? Well, first of all, we have to establish the grounds upon which we practice. This is most important. If we think that the grounds upon which we practice is just simply crossing our legs, that's sad. If we think that that it is in the words, that's not going to get us there. But we have to go beyond that. And we need a well-knowing advisor to help us to understand that it's beyond these kinds of issues. And anything that we have in which we have a duality, subject and object, belongs to the samsaric side. It belongs to the creative side. So what we want to do is we want to have the idea of of beyond that. And I hesitate to say beyond that, because when I say beyond that, then you need to mute. There's a couple of people on here. Thank you. Okay. So in talking about this ara pratisarana, it says serves frequently to polarize words and meaning. The traditional explanation of this formula, however, is of no avail. The canonical injunction relying on meaning, do not rely on letters, does not imply that the words are not suitable to express artha or meaning. On the contrary, it aims to emphasize the importance of the understanding context over text memorization. So what it's saying is that we don't try to memorize a sutra or memorize these lines or try to do this. I'm always playfully picking at Robert to say, don't parrot the words. You have to understand that. And so he serves as my light post for others to say, okay, it's not just in the words, even though he says it from his heart, and it's different. But I use him in this way, and he understands the manner in which I'm using him to say it's not in the parroting of the words. It is in this understanding the context, understanding what this means. A word that would probably be better than understanding here is a realization, or a mini awakening. That the mini awakening is that we're not yet awakened, but we know that this is where awakening lies. We don't really know what that is, but we know it is not in the words, but it is not necessarily in the meaning of the words, but not in the meaning of the words in an intellectual exercise. This is a very difficult, subtle transition that's there. That's why sometimes they call it a transcendence. So we're transcending the idea of holding on to the teachings and experiencing the teachings. The best times when I have read a sutra or a treatise is when I experience the heart of the author, that I can feel that, not as a subject and object, but as if this tune that is playing is heard, and you hear it in this way. Master Sheng Yen, in his poem Solitary Man, he talks about playing a tune that no one hears. And it's correct in that way. In fact, no one does hear it, but it is still capable of being heard. Huh? How is that? You have to go beyond the words to say that he's correct in this way. In fact, no one can hear it, because the no one is no one. It's just mind. So it's a double play. There's one that you go, oh yes, he's very, very smart, because he's saying no one can hear it. Poor guy, he can't, nobody can hear what he's saying. But it's a play on words and play on intention, that he's espousing the correctness of the Dharma, the correct meaning, the context of it. If we only see the words, we say, oh, he was very intellectual, very clever in the manner in which he did it. We never bothered to look for the essence of the meaning. And this is the part that's very important, because in any of our practice, we have to go to the essence of the practice rather than the meaning. And in this way, as we begin to practice, we allow our mind to non-abide. What does it non-abide with? Does that mean it doesn't abide with the environment? No, not really. The environment is mine. Of course, you're going to be involved. You put it there, huh? Not you. Well, you, but you in a way, let's say the fictional you or illusory you is doing all of this, but all of that machination of doing all of this, nevertheless, is mind itself. And so when we see these from the true and proper understanding, we no longer try to cling to these concepts. We no longer try to cling to the environment as something that's there. It's, as what the ancient master said, it's as useful as clinging to, for a shipwrecked sailor to be clinging to foam in the ocean or some seaweed. It's not going to give them any buoyancy. It's not going to save them. But this is the way in which we practice. If we practice in this way, then it does us no good. So I'm showing you from the very, very beginning, even before there was the Chan school, that there was this approach to it. And so let me use a little bit more time here on this. The Kusala Mula Parigraha Sutra talks about this, and this was a quote there, and they're talking to Sarasvatiputra, and it says, grasp the meaning correctly. How should one grasp it? By grasping the meaning, not by grasping the letters. Ordinary folk conform to letters. Wise people conform to the meaning. Sarasvatiputra, what are the letters? The term letters is a synonym for the basis of syllables, the basis of information, the basis of verbal expression. Letters are what is knowable, cognizable, comprehensible, verbal expressions and descriptions. So then what is the meaning? The meaning is what is not verbally expressible. If the meaning were as ordinary folk grasp it, it would be words and not meaning. Thus, meaning cannot be verbally expressed. There it is. This is very early sutra, and they're saying what the Chan people said all along, beyond words and letters. So Chan, in its origins, in its very early origins, is already establishing this. This is what this master Sen Chao was espousing, contemporary to Bodhidharma. Give a couple more of these so you get an idea of this. The sutras is like, it's talking about pratisarana, but it's the sutras Suvika Karanta Diva Putra Pariprecha. And this sutra, I'm sure you've all heard of the sutra, but it says to connect the meaning and inexpressibility is yet another way. It equates reliance on artha with knowledge, and everything is ultimately inexpressible. As a consequence, it praises the Buddhas who do not follow words at all. And so this is a quote from the text. Manjusri, what constitutes bodhisattvas who rely on meaning? Manjusri replied, divine being, when the bodhisattvas know that all constituent factors are verbally inexpressible, they are bodhisattvas who rely on meaning. The divine being asked, Manjusri, what constitutes bodhisattvas who speak according to the Buddha's teachings? They're very interesting, because he's saying, well, if this is the way, then what do you think of these bodhisattvas who speak in accordance with the Buddha's teachings? Aren't they relying on words? What do you think? So what's he going to say? Are they relying on words? And is this just words, or is it really something different? This is very, very important, because otherwise you might throw the baby out with the bathwater and throw away all of the words. So he says, Manjusri replied, divine being, when bodhisattvas do not rely in any way on words, they are bodhisattvas who speak according to the Buddha's teachings. So this is very, very important. It's important for us as a well-known advisor to pass to others. And it's important for you as a student to understand the meaning, and that it is not something that we are teaching. What we're doing is we are expressing the meaning, not expressing words to rely upon. In fact, those words have to literally dissolve, but they nevertheless have a purpose in the function of mind. So we don't throw them out. We just have to make sure that from our heart, when we espouse the Dharma, that the meaning is there. This is very, very important. And it's why I rely on this mind work presentation rather than doing a PowerPoint where you have point by point by point and subpoint and subpoint. I will do that occasionally, but I don't want to train scholars. I want you to feel the heart of Master Sheng Yen, to feel the heart of Bodhidharma, Hui Ne, Ling Chi, all these masters. They're all saying the same thing. If you don't believe me, go and read their whatever treatise they've written. And you will find this, and you will find also exactly what is being said, what I'm expressing to you. If we look at the Lankavatara, which is one of the chief Chan sutras, it holds that reliance on words precludes realization. So if we rely on the words, we cannot get the realization, because we're looking at an object, subject and object, and saying there's this and this is here, and then the subheading and this one here, and all these are minor points, and we're holding all of this. But we have to let that go. We have to look beyond the paper so that we can see it in this way. I mentioned before the story of the one disciple who could not get a realization from his master. So the master suggested he go to another master, which he did. And when he came back, he had obtained a realization. And he saw his master there, and his master was there, and he was reading the scroll. And the disciple came to him and says, what a pity, you're seeking for the meaning within the words on the scroll. But the answer lies 2 feet in front of the scroll. How do you understand that? If you try to understand it and make it a great story to tell other people, what a pity. You've just turned this into more words. But if you use it as an invitation, as an exhortation to have people to investigate Chan, then that's good. Then they look and say, well, what does that mean? I don't understand what that means. Of course you don't understand, but you need to look and say, what does this mean? The what is important. The question, what? I often say that. What is the question? People think I'm asking a question when I'm saying, what is the question? But it's the answer. The answer is, what is the question? And everything we look at it in this way. Mind. We just keep coming back to this. So let me continue on with the Lanka, see if there was anything else. A bodhisattva should rely on meaning and should not rely on words. Respectable men and women, which I'm sure all of you are, who follow the letters, remove themselves from paramatha. So they remove themselves from the unconditioned and do not help others realize it. So if you're relying on the letters and you're relying on this to teach others, it's the blind leading the blind. You can never touch the unconditioned, because the unconditioned is beyond the words. We use the words, but we have to not attach to them, not create a tail to the words. So if we create a tail, then anytime we need it, we pull that up, and now there's the tail. And then you go ask the parrot, and the parrot will say, in this circumstance, you should say this. In this, you should say just one. But it isn't in this way. They cannot save themselves, much less save others. We have to go to this primary meaning, to ekayana, just mine, in this way. It's very, very important for us. And you see this from the very, very beginning. So true to my representation of what this was about, I'm showing you the ancient Chan Masters, and even before the ancient Chan Masters, what predated them in terms of this, what could be called original meaning. So the author says, all these extracts establish an unbridgeable gulf between words and meaning, but no sutra spells out the reason for this divide. They do, however, provide several clues that might help us understand. The richest source is the Lankavatara. So in this, it's saying the Lankavatara contains the most articulate discussion of the contrast between Ruta and Artha. Unlike other sources, it acknowledges a correlation between words and meanings. Yet the sutra deplores the common practice to understand Artha through words. Artha, again, is meaning, through words, Ruta. Infernal rebirth and uninterrupted samsaric experience await those who indulge in such mistake. Wow, that's a pretty strong prohibition, that if you make a mistake to this, that according to the Lankavatara Sutra, infernal rebirth and uninterrupted samsaric experience. So the good thing is you get reborn. The bad thing is you die again, and then you get reborn and die again until you finally get that. So if you like that, then that's fine. If you want to go beyond that, then it's better to practice right. Otherwise, you're just like a skip in a record. Just keep playing the same thing over and over again. Artha, so words, it holds must be realized in, or excuse me, not words, meaning it holds must be realized in secluded meditation, not through verbal understanding. And again, in this kind of a way, I'm almost out of time. Where we're at is, it's not just in meditation, as we found out, and this was the adjustments that on the fly that the Chan masters were going through and beginning to practice, which Bodhidharma brought in terms of what's called wall gazing. So here now we're seeing there's a reliance on wall gazing. In Chinese, you would know the term as biguan. How many Chinese know my Chinese of saying biguan? Nobody. Well, thank you, Roche. Okay. Because people will say, okay, I'm going to go on a biguan, or Master Sheng Yen went on a biguan for 7 or 8 years, or whatever. This is like a solitary retreat, but it means this wall gazing, just simply letting the mind go and having a direct experience. So it's not just simply crossing your legs. There is an essence to this, which is to allowing the mind to simply reflect the nature. It is not killing the mind and going into a dark cave or just forgetting about everything. It is the direct experience of mind in that moment to moment to moment. But we know that the present moment does not exist. The past and the future, we started with that. So it is just this direct experience of mind. So this biguan served as the basis of the proper Chan practice. This was something that Bodhidharma came with as a correct understanding of how to practice, not just simply crossing your legs and then watching movies or blanking the mind completely, which is possible, and just entering into a pleasurable state. That is not the practice. So here we're seeing the origins of Chan, and the Lankavatara is setting forth and saying, if we really want to do this, we need to stop this from having, excuse me for 1 second. And we'll continue a little bit with this, and it says, this is a quote from the Lankavatara Sutra, Mahamatmi Mati. What is language here? So he's referring to Ruta words. Language is a combination of discriminative conceptualization, speech, and letters, which is issued from the teeth, jaw, palate, tongue, lips, throat, and caused by karmic mutual tracings of talking and discriminative conceptualization. Where in mind are there words that are everlasting? What is the language of the Buddha? Of course, we can communicate in this language using the Buddha mind, but it's not real. Think about that. In that time period, what language would the Buddha, if the Buddha originated from somewhere, what language would the Buddha use? Would it be Sanskrit, Pali, English, Chinese? Those words, they're just illusory. We cannot have any kind of reliance on that. That's not the language of the Buddha. That's why the Buddha said, in fact, he never spoke any words of the Dharma. Yeah, it goes back that far. And we have to look at this. And so we see this with the true and proper understanding. So then he says, Mahamati, what is the meaning? And that's Artha. A bodhisattva skilled in the meaning is a bodhisattva who advances the path of the meaning through stages, referring to bhumis, and other different states, which are the scope of one's inner path. This happens once the bodhisattva has entered the road to the city of nirvana through his own understanding, following the attainment of the reversion of the basis of karmic traces. So essentially this attainment is not really an attainment, it's just letting go of all of these karmic conditions which have perfumed the mind into accepting illusory states as being real. Moreover, Mahamati, a bodhisattva skilled in the language and meaning, considers language to be neither the same nor different from the meaning, and the meaning to be neither the same nor different from the language. So here is a correct way of looking at it, because irregardless, all of these words, albeit they may be illusory, as is your notion of the ego, personality, or life and being, they nevertheless belong to mind. So we never get to the point of to saying, is it existent or non-existent? We don't have to disprove words. We just have to have the true and proper understanding that the meaning is that those words themselves cannot deliver us. And he's saying, Mahamati, if the language was different from the meaning, the manifestations of the meaning would be brought about without language meaning. Is accessed through language like a treasure found with a lamp. And this was something that the Lankavatara Sutra did that was a little bit different than from before. It was using the signal, this analogy of a lamp, and saying it is useful in this way that it is a lamp that illuminates the path. So that's not bad. The other sutras had much stronger prohibitions in terms of reliance upon the meanings of the words, or understanding of the words themselves, and trying to get this direct realization. But they're saying it's not bad to help you in this way, so that way you don't just throw out all your sutras and say there's nothing here. Like a man after taking a lamp who looked at the treasure and thinks, this is my treasure, and with such form and in this place. So Mahamati, bodhisattvas who are free from speech and discriminative conceptualization enter the inner path to realization with the lamp of speech, discriminative conceptualization, and language. Moreover, because the attachment based on clinging to the meaning of the expressions all dharmas are undestroyed, unoriginated, naturally extinguished, triple vehicle, single vehicle mind, inherent essence, and so forth. As it emerges from the language, one falls into views of reification and detraction. Having discriminated, reality emerges from the language, they reify, and because of this reification, they fall into infernal dwelling. So if we cling to it, then we've messed up. But if we use it in the proper way to go beyond the meaning of the word, how do we do this? This is the last part I'll do. I know I'm running a little bit over. Just be in this present moment, but don't be as an individual. It's not Gilbert in the present moment, not you in the present moment. Just have this awareness in this moment. You're aware. What are you aware of? You're aware of everything that is around you, coming through your consciousness, what you see through your senses or feel, taste, touch. All of those are mind. That they're mind and they're perfectly arising because causes and conditions never fail. They're precisely there and precisely empty. When we see the world in this way, we've gone beyond the meaning of the words and we're now into the practice of Chan. Chan is a verb. It means practice. So we need to practice, and we practice in this way. We're constantly coursing through the deep prajna paramita. Unfortunately, most of the time we change it into the deep whatever. You can put your word there, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be clearly what you see is just mind, and you know why it's there, precisely why it's there, and you know how to respond to it. This is the beauty of the Chan mind, is that it is interactive, it's spontaneous, it's functioning. It is not a dead mind, not a dead wood on a cushion, not a dead wood in life. I've been presenting this for I don't know how many years in different places, I go to and I talk about this, and there's times when I talk about the one monk whose hut was burned because he called himself dead wood, and his benefactor thought this is not the proper practice. So don't be dead wood. Today, this life, this breath, make it count. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at with this one. I ran out of time. I needed probably another like 10-20 hours to go over everything, but we'll get there. Okay, so we'll leave it open to questions. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Gilbert. So anyone, if you have questions, just unmute yourself and ask right away. I think 2 people raised their hands. Miranda
Echo,
and
who else? Go ahead. Whichever of you, well, I think you have to unmute. So unmute and then Miranda.
Hi, I think Michelle raised her hand before so I think she should go first.
I thought you were before me.
All right. Okay, I won't waste time. I'll just go right ahead. Thank you, Michelle. Well, thank you, Gilbert, for your guidance. It's just, whoa. Yes. Okay. So my question is awakening. Now, if mine is not dead wood, arising, everything constantly arising and diminishing. Is there such a thing as an awakening?
Say the last part.
Awakening.
No,
awakening.
Right before that, you said
okay.
Is.
So when we put in the context of mind is mind, experiencing everything that comes and goes, everything that arises, everything that diminishes, if we are actually in this, if we're actually in this frame of mind, this context, is there such a thing as ever getting to the point of awakening?
Yeah, it is what I would call a realization that awakening lies within this way, that you're no longer relying on words and phrases, and that what you're doing is that you are practicing in the correct way. Like all of the Chan masters talk about the true and proper understanding. So now you are using that, and it's as if you now have discovered that before you were using a hoe, but you had it reversed, and the blade was close to your hands, and you're just using the stick part to hoe the garden. Now you've turned it around, and now you know how to use it. And so that realization will lead to an awakening. It is inevitable. It will lead to an awakening, but first you have to turn it around. And so once turning it around with this realization, you're not far from it. As long as you don't feel, well, I'm not far from it. So if I could do this by lunchtime, I'm for sure I'm going to become enlightened. But if you don't think in this way and you just practice it, there's no difference. That awakening is right there in that present moment. The only difference is you just have to make it last longer. It can't just it's like somebody says, yeah, I can walk on a tightrope, for 1 second. And everybody can walk on a tightrope for 1 second. The trick is that you have to stay balanced. And so it is kind of equated in this way that you just stay balanced and you stay there and you remember that you're a practitioner. Yeah. Okay, next one. Michelle, and then I think Echo. Unmute yourself.
Oh, hi, Gilbert. Amitabha. In your presentation about Dharma and meditation, many times you emphasize the environment. You mention all the environment is reflected in your mind. So environment is your mind. I hear that, I hear the words, I hear the phrase, but I don't think I get the meaning behind. So my question is, why you so emphasize the environment when we do the meditation? Why is that so important?
Oh, it's important because when we talk about the environment, we're talking about the conditioned and the unconditioned. There's a saying to know the arising mind as the non-arising mind. The arising mind cannot know the non-arising mind. It cannot, the conditioned cannot know what is the unconditioned. But the unconditioned can look in this way. So what we're doing is we're attuning the mind in the correct way so that we do not prevent the mind from seeing things. It's just that when we see it, we are unconfused as to the origin of all appearances within mind or all appearances within the environment. The environment is not limited to what you see around you, but what is coming through the consciousness. That is also the environment, because that also has an effect on what we consider to be the external environment. But the internal and external environment are not different. They're the condition. And so when we practice in the right way, we rest the mind in the unconditioned being the mind that is unborn and uncreated, that is aware of its surroundings. And again, when I say surroundings, it includes mental cognition. So we practice in this way so that we're not confused about how what we're doing when we're sitting on a cushion. Otherwise, we can blank the mind, but it does us no good. The mind is like this wondrous reflective mirror that's there. It's pure, it's unstained by that. We don't know that. Mind knows, but we don't know that. So we need to accord our practice with mind work. Okay. Do you have a follow-up on that, Michelle?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, what I get is for the environment, not just the external. It also including whatever happened in your mind, the cognition, your awareness, everything happened in your inside, internal too.
There's no internal and external. It is just appearances. That's the conditioned mind. When we have to attune ourselves to the idea of conditioned mind, the arising mind. And when we do that knowing when we're sitting and aware that a thought has just come in, that which is aware of that thought is the non-arising mind. We can trick ourselves into saying, aha, I saw this thought come by, but that's just the self kind of like congratulating itself for following the tail of the thought. But when the mind is clearly settled, it doesn't have that kind of an attachment to the appearances that are going by. Okay, in due time it will come to. Echo, you had a question?
I don't really have a question. So thank you for asking me.
Oh, okay, I thought you had your hand up there for a moment, but that's all right. Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's okay.
Okay, anybody else have a question or a comment? This is a bit today, and in terms of the practice. Go ahead. Yes.
I feel like a person's determination wanted to really swim against the river is very crucial to work on this very difficult work. We can listen to the talks, we can understand so crucial and important, but we can just keep standing in the same spot, listening and not determined to really let this kind of mindset of subject and object die, and really determine we're gonna just make the decision. I'm not gonna act like that anymore. I think it's really crucial. Without that determination, I think it's just I feel like we're wasting times to just chasing words and chasing whatever shadows. That's just my comment.
Thank you. This is the reason why I'm giving this presentation. With this type of an attitude, you're not far from it. All you have to do is just practice, because you realize all of a sudden that this is not in the words. It's not in like following something. You have to go beyond that. And again, this is this area that's very subtle when we're talking about arising mind, non-arising mind, conditioned, unconditioned. They all mean the same thing. Yet all of that is still all mind. It has to be in this way. If it's not mind, then the words would be separate from mind and would create a duality. But what we do is we as in the Bible, kind of interesting, we render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, and mind is king. Mind is king, and we give it all back to mind and see it in this way. And so this is very important. When we see it in this way, is we don't discount it. We don't have to prove that it doesn't exist or it exists. We just see things clearly with this true and proper understanding. It's what I've been presenting for years. Maybe I've become a little bit better at it, or finding deeper things, and thankful for the internet for being able to find more and more practice guides. But it's still the same thing that I've been presenting for many years. You just have to make a decision that you're going to practice in the right way. If you do, that's half the battle. The other one is just staying awake. So, you know, Echo, you've been doing this for a long time, so you've shown you've been able to stay awake, so that's good. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yeah, Harry. Oh, unmute. Harry, you have to unmute.
Oh, there we go. Oh, okay, it wasn't letting me. Okay, mine broke through. So I just a quick comment. Something I found very helpful in aligning to what you've been talking about is something that John Donne, the scholar, said. He said, you know, the Chan phrase is everything that you say is wrong. He said, but you can say something useful. And I think that just sort of embodies a lot of what's going on. Of course, you could speak for 20 hours of what useful means, but just the idea that we really can receive things, but we have to be very vigilant about what exactly is going on. You know, not to be dead wood, but to be very open. That's it.
Yeah, I think he, if he was asked, "Who are you?" his best answer would be, "I am done."
Very good.
Sorry.
I like that.
Yeah.
Robert raised his hand.
All right, Robert,
hi.
go ahead.
Hi. I mean, after the last 5 years listening to you, and today, it almost boiled down to getting the almost like receiving a meaning of what you try to deliver, and representing all the other patriarchs trying to deliver a message, and in my heart, it's like, it's as clear as like making a choice, because you have shown the old way or the normal way, a normal sentient being easily fall into a trap. And now that you kind of held a light, and the light is quite clear that there is a much better way. So I use the word making a choice. It is just as simple as, what do you choose? Even if there is a you, even there's an I making a choice, but this I is making a choice of giving up the I and moving forward without, it's like leaving it behind. There is a better way. And it's simply as simple as just making a choice.
Yeah, it's very good. When we talk about giving up the I, we don't have to give up the body. We just simply have to give up to the habitual tendencies that the I attaches to create the idea that there's this independent life and being. So simply using the proper essence of the practice and the meaning of the practice, we still do whatever we're doing. You know what you do, and I think you're retired. If you're working, you work, and whatever you do, and you're simply doing those things. The only difference is that you don't pay attention to the I, but you use this body, you use this personality. Each of us, because of causes and conditions, have different personalities, different sets of humor, different types of things, and different weaknesses. We are aware of all that. We're not perfect, and we're not trying to be a perfect human being as much as we are practicing in terms of the Buddha mind. And so this is a subtle change that's there. So we don't have to throw everything out. We just have to realign how the mind perceives, because we use the mind's perception to see things. And that's what you're doing now. And that mind's perception is saying to you, Robert, I got to tell other people about this. This is important. This is the Bodhi mind that you're generating now, you know, and you've been generating it for quite a while. And so this is good. This is why you're listening to it and it makes sense. It's important for you to say what you just said, because this is the way. Okay. Do we have time for any other questions, Mina? No questions, comments? This is not necessarily easy things because it's beyond like words. You have to really trust your heart. If you trust your heart, it will work. Okay. That's the most important part, is practice with your heart.